Far beyond the safe borders of Earth, the galaxy was burning for many years. The Orion Alliance had been fighting a terrible war against the Varkan Empire. The Varkans were not just powerful, they were feared across the stars. They did not come for peace, they came to conquer. Destroy and rule, one by one, planets had fallen. Cities were turned to dust, moons were broken. And entire civilizations disappeared into silence. Every world that stood against them was crushed. Now only one target remained on their path. Earth humanity was still new in the Alliance. Compared to ancient alien races, humans were young, emotional, and often underestimated. Many allies respected human courage, but they did not fully trust human decisions. They are too reckless, some said. They fight with emotion, not logic, others believed. But humans had something the galaxy did not understand. When they had no way forward, they still moved, and now Earth was in danger, deep in space, near the dead moon of Xiron 7. The enemy had built something terrifying. It was not just a weapon. It was a warning to the entire galaxy. Its name was Sunbreaker. The massive station floated in darkness like a giant black star. Its surface was covered with heavy weapons, endless defense systems, and enough power to destroy entire planets. With one single shot, Sunbreaker could erase Earth forever. And it was almost ready. Inside the Alliance Council chamber, fear filled the room. Leaders from many worlds sat around a giant table. Military commanders, scientists, alien generals, and human officers all stared at the hologram of the Sunbreaker. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, one alien commander broke the silence. If that station activates, Earth is gone, he said, and after Earth, the rest of us, another general nodded. Our fleets cannot reach it. Their shields are too strong, a scientist stepped forward. There is one weakness, she said, a thermal gap inside the station's core. Very small, very unstable, the hologram changed, showing a narrow path deep inside the station. A single stealth fighter could enter through this gap, she explained. If the reactor core is hit from inside, the entire station will collapse. The room became silent again. Everyone understood what she was really saying. Only one ship could go, only one pilot. And there would be almost no chance of survival. This was not a mission, it was a death sentence. An old commander crossed his arms. No pilot will survive that run, he said. The heat alone will destroy the ship, another officer added. Even if they reach the core, escape would be impossible. No one volunteered. No one moved because everyone in that room knew the truth. Whoever accepted this mission would never come back. At the far end of the chamber, a quiet human officer stood near the wall. Listening, Captain Elias Voss. 32 years old, calm eyes, steady hands, and a name known for impossible flying missions. He was not loud, he was not famous like war heroes on the news. But every pilot in the fleet knew one thing. If something could not be done, Elias would still try. He looked at the hologram of Earth, turning slowly in blue light home. His father had once fought to protect that same world during the First Contact War. And he never returned. Elias remembered his father's final words before leaving. Sometimes history only changes because one person refuses to step back, the council continued arguing. Searching for another plan, another option, another miracle. But there was none, only silence, fear. And the shape of the Sunbreaker floating above them, Elias slowly stepped forward. The sound of his boots against the floor made the room turn toward him. He stood in front of the table, calm, without drama, without fear. "I'll do it," he said. For a second, no one reacted. Then the room exploded with disbelief. A senior alien commander stood up immediately. "You do not understand," he said sharply. "This is not bravery, this is suicide." Elias looked at him. His voice quiet but strong. "I understand perfectly," he replied. "That is exactly why I'm going. The room fell silent again. Even the strongest commanders had no answer, because they could see it in his eyes. He had already made his decision, far away, near Xiron 7. The Sunbreaker waited in the dark, cold, silent, and ready to fire. And somewhere between fear and hope, one human pilot had just accepted the impossible mission. A mission that could save Earth, or end with his name lost among the stars. The Alliance Council chamber remained silent long after Captain Elias Voss spoke those words. "I'll do it." The sentence was simple. But it felt heavier than the war itself. Around the giant table, alien generals looked at him with disbelief. Human officers exchanged quiet glances. Some saw bravery, others saw madness at the center of the room. The hologram of the Sunbreaker still floated like a dark star. Cold, massive, and waiting, the senior Varix commander stepped closer. His voice sharp. "Captain Voss, you are asking to fly directly into the heart of the most dangerous weapon ever built," he said. "No shields will protect you, no fleet can rescue you. And no pilot has ever survived something like this." Elias stood still. "I know," he answered calmly. The commander shook his head. "Then why would you accept?" Elias looked at the blue image of Earth, turning slowly beside the Sunbreaker hologram. "Because if no one does, Earth dies," he said. No one argued after that, because there was nothing to argue against. The scientist who discovered the thermal gap activated the station map again. "This is your path," she said. The Sunbreaker reactor creates unstable heat vents every 90 seconds, for only 7 seconds. One thermal gap opens wide enough for a small stealth fighter. A thin glowing line appeared on the hologram. "Twisting deep inside the station, you must enter here," she continued. "Travel through the reactor tunnel. Avoid the defense drones, reach the central core, and fire directly into the energy chamber." She paused for a moment. "If your shot is perfect, the reactor will collapse and destroy the station. And if it misses?" Elias asked. She looked at him quietly. "Then you die for nothing." The room became silent again. An old human admiral finally spoke. "There must be another option," he said. "We cannot send one pilot alone into this." But everyone already knew the truth. There was no second plan. There was no backup strategy. There was only this impossible path, later, in the military hangar. Elias walked alone beside rows of damaged ships. The war had left its marks everywhere. Burned metal, emergency repairs, silent workers moving without rest. At the far end of the hangar waited his ship. Ghost One, small, fast, and built for stealth. It looked fragile compared to the giant war cruisers around it. But Elias trusted it more than anything. A mechanic stood beside it. An older man with tired eyes and oil-stained hands. "You always choose the easy jobs," the mechanic said with a small smile. Elias smiled faintly. "Someone has to keep life interesting," he replied. The mechanic opened a small metal box and took something out. A worn silver badge, scratched by time. Elias froze for a second. It was his father's old pilot badge. "He gave this to me years ago," the mechanic said softly. "He told me if you ever flew the mission, no sane person would accept. I should return it." Elias took it carefully. His father had worn it during the first contact war, before he died defending Earth orbit. For a moment, the noise of the hangar disappeared, only memory remained. His father standing by an old fighter ship, smiling once before leaving. "History is not changed by people who wait," he had said. "It changes when someone decides fear is not enough to stop them." Elias closed his hand around the badge. "Guess he knew me too well," he said quietly. The mechanic nodded. "He knew exactly who you would become." Outside the station windows, the stars stretched endlessly. And somewhere far away, the Sunbreaker was charging, preparing its first and final shot. Time was running out in the command room. Alliance fleets were preparing for battle. Not to destroy the station, but to create a distraction. Hundreds of ships would attack the outer defenses. They would draw enemy fire, opening a small path for Ghost One. Most of them would not return either. War never asked for permission. Elias entered the final briefing room. The officers stood as he arrived. The admiral looked at him carefully. "Once you enter the thermal gap, communication will fail," he said. "You will be completely alone." Elias nodded. "Understood. No rescue team can follow." "I know." The admiral took a slow breath. "Captain, if you want to step back, now is the time." Elias looked around the room. At tired soldiers, worried commanders, and the silent fear they all carried. Then he looked again at Earth on the screen, home. The place where ordinary people were sleeping, unaware that tomorrow might never come. He shook his head slowly. "If I step back," he said, "then history steps back with me." No one spoke after that. The admiral simply nodded once. Launch preparations began immediately. Technicians moved around Ghost One, checking engines, fuel systems, and weapons. Elias climbed into the cockpit and placed his father's badge near the control panel. The launch bay doors slowly opened, revealing the endless black of space. His hands rested on the controls, calm and steady. Ahead of him waited the impossible mission. Behind him waited an entire world. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. No backup, no second chance, no safe return, only one human pilot and one shot to change history forever. Before the launch, the station felt strangely quiet. Outside, thousands of workers, soldiers, and pilots moved through the giant Alliance base. Preparing for war, ships were loading weapons. Engineers were checking shields. And commanders were sending final orders. But inside Hangar 7, where Ghost One waited, time felt slower, like the universe itself was holding its breath. Captain Elias Voss stood beside his fighter ship, staring at the stars beyond the open bay doors. Soon, he would fly into the darkest place in the galaxy, and everyone knew he might never return. Yet his face showed no fear, only thought. He was not thinking about glory, not about becoming a hero. He was thinking about home. Earth, the oceans, the crowded cities, the quiet nights under real stars. The ordinary life people fought so hard to protect. For Elias, that was enough reason. An old voice interrupted his thoughts. "You always look too calm before disaster." Elias turned and smiled faintly. Commander Hawley was walking toward him. He had trained Elias years ago and was one of the few people who understood him completely. "You taught me that," Elias replied. Hawley crossed his arms and looked at Ghost One. "Still think this is a good idea?" he asked. Elias looked at the ship. "No," he said honestly. "I think it's a terrible idea." Hawley laughed quietly. "Good. I was worried you had finally lost your mind." For a moment, both men stood in silence, watching the stars. Then Hale's expression changed, becoming more serious. "Your father stood here once," he said softly. "Same hangar. Same look in his eyes." Elias did not answer immediately. He had heard stories of his father all his life. A pilot who stayed behind during the First Contact War so others could escape. A man who chose duty over survival. But stories were never enough to replace a father. He believed Earth would always need people willing to stand alone, Hawley continued. He was right. Elias looked down at the small silver badge in his hand. His father's old pilot badge, worn by time, but still strong. "Sometimes I wonder if he was brave," Elias said quietly. "Or just as stubborn as I am." Hawley smiled slightly. "Usually both," he replied. Across the station, warning alarm sounded once. A signal that the Varkan fleet had changed position. Time was running faster now in the Alliance Command Center. Giant holograms showed the enemy fleet surrounding the Sunbreaker. The station looked like a black giant protected by fire and steel. Admirals and alien generals argued over final attack patterns. Every movement had to be perfect. If the distraction failed, Elias would never even reach the thermal gap. One officer reported, "Enemy patrol routes updated. Defense drones increased by 30%, another added. "They know something is coming." The human admiral turned toward the screen. "Then we hit them before they understand what it is," he said. Back in Hangar 7, Elias entered the cockpit of Ghost 1. The seat closed around him like an old memory. The control lights came alive one by one. Soft and familiar, he ran his hand across the panel. Every switch, every system, every warning light. This was the place where he trusted himself most. A transmission opened on the small screen beside him. It was from his younger sister Mara back on Earth. Recorded days earlier in case communication failed. Her face appeared, smiling but worried. "If you're watching this," she said, "it means you're about to do something very stupid again." Elias smiled despite himself. She continued, "I know you won't listen if I tell you not to go. So I won't try." Her voice became softer. "Just remember this. Heroes are not the people who never feel fear. They're the people who move anyway." She paused, then smiled again. "And if you survive." "I'm still stealing your old bike from storage," the message ended. For a moment, Elias sat there in silence. The weight of everything pressing against him. Family, memory, war, and the strange calm before all endings. Then he placed his father's badge beside the controls and took a deep breath. He was not the best pilot in the galaxy. Not the strongest soldier, not the greatest hero. He was simply the one who said yes when everyone else could not, and sometimes that was enough to change everything. Outside, the launch bay doors opened wider. The stars looked endless, cold, and waiting. Alliance ships were already moving into formation. The final distraction battle was about to begin. Commander Hale's voice came through the radio. "Calm and steady, Elias," he said, "no matter what happens out there. You were never flying for medals." Elias adjusted the controls. "I know," he replied. Hale gave one final answer. "You're flying so tomorrow still exists." The engines of Ghost 1 began to rise with quiet power. The cockpit trembled softly, ready, alive. Elias looked forward into the darkness of space. He was not flying for glory, he was flying for history. The launch bay doors opened fully, beyond them. Space stretched like an endless black ocean. Cold and silent. Far in the distance, stars burned like quiet witnesses. And somewhere among them waited the Sunbreaker. Captain Elias Voss sat inside Ghost 1, hands resting calmly on the controls. The cockpit lights reflected softly across his face. Every system was ready, every warning checked. Every path already decided. There was no turning back now. Across the Alliance station, hundreds of warships moved into attack formation. Massive cruisers, fast interceptors, and defense carriers lined up like a final wall between Earth and destruction. This was not a victory fleet. It was a distraction. Their job was simple. Keep the Varkan Empire busy long enough for one small ship to disappear into the chaos. And that one small ship was Ghost 1, inside command control. The human admiral watched the battlefield hologram carefully. His voice was low but clear. "All fleets, prepare for engagement. Operation Last Horizon begins now." Across the station, engines roared to life. Pilots tightened their grips. Soldiers gave final nods, and every heart carried the same truth. Many of them would not return. Commander Hale's voice came through Elias's headset. "This is your last chance to change your mind," he said. Elias smiled faintly. "You ask that every time. And one day I expect a smarter answer," Hale replied. Ghost 1 moved slowly toward the edge of the launch platform. Below, the stars waited like a silent road. Elias looked once at the small silver badge beside his controls. His father's badge, a reminder that some paths are chosen long before you walk them. He touched it once, then focused forward. "Ghost 1 ready," he said. The Admiral answered from command. Captain Voss, your mission is clear. Reach the Sunbreaker. Destroy the reactor core, and if possible, come home. Elias took a slow breath. I'll do my best, he replied. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Launch. Ghost 1 shot forward like a bullet into the darkness. The sudden speed pushed against Elias's body, but his hands remained steady. The station disappeared behind him, and only war remained ahead. At the same moment, the Alliance fleet attacked. Massive ships opened fire across space. Bright energy beams crossed the darkness like storms of light. Explosions bloomed near the Varkan defense lines. Silent and deadly, the enemy reacted instantly. The Varkan fleet moved with brutal precision. Heavy warships turned, defense cannons activated, and fighter swarms launched like metal insects. The battle had begun. Inside the chaos, Ghost 1 stayed low, small enough to avoid major detection. Elias guided the fighter through burning debris and flashing laser fire. Moving faster than thought, Alliance Command spoke quickly through the radio. Enemy interceptors moving left flank. Maintain shadow path and stay below sensor range. Understood, Elias replied. Eyes locked forward. Ahead, the Sunbreaker appeared. Even from a distance, it looked impossible. A giant black station floating near the dead moon of Xeron 7, its surface covered in weapon towers, shield generators and rotating defense drones. It did not look like a machine. It looked like a fortress built by fear itself. Elias whispered quietly, "So that's the monster." Suddenly, warning alarms screamed inside Ghost 1. Enemy lock detected. 2 Varkan fighters had spotted him. "They found me," Elias said calmly. Without hesitation, laser fire exploded behind him. Red light flashed across the cockpit as Ghost 1 twisted sharply between the attacks. The enemy fighters stayed close. Fast and aggressive, Alliance Command shouted. "Break right now." Elias pulled hard. The ship rolled through a storm of fire. Barely missing a direct hit, one blast struck part of his shield system. Warning lights flashed immediately. "Shield integrity dropping," the computer announced. "Not now," Elias muttered. He pushed the engines harder. Ghost 1 flew straight toward a field of broken asteroid fragments near Xeron 7. Dangerous, unstable, and perfect for losing pursuers. The Varkan fighters followed without hesitation. Inside the asteroid field, everything became movement. Sharp rocks, burning metal, laser fire, and impossible turns. Elias moved through it like memory, not thinking, only flying. One enemy fighter hit an asteroid and vanished in fire. The second stayed behind him, still locked on target. Elias waited, calm, patient. Then at the final second, he cut engine power and dropped suddenly between 2 massive rocks. The Varkan pilot reacted too late. The fighter slammed into stone and disappeared in an explosion of light. Silence returned for one brief moment. Elias restarted full power and looked ahead. The Sunbreaker was closer now, much closer. Its thermal gap entrance hidden beneath rotating defense rings. One path, one chance, no second attempt. Alliance Command returned, quieter this time. "Captain, once you enter the thermal gap, communication will be lost." Elias nodded, even though they could not. The Sunbreaker filled the entire front view of Ghost 1. From this close, it no longer looked like a station. It looked like a dead world made of metal and fire. Its outer surface moved with constant activity. Defense drones circled like hungry insects. Heavy cannons tracked every possible target. And shield towers glowed with dangerous energy. At its center, hidden deep inside, waited the reactor core, the heart of the weapon. The place where history would either change or end. Captain Elias Voss tightened his grip on the controls. His breathing stayed calm, but every second now mattered. Alliance Command spoke one last time through the radio. "Captain Voss, thermal gap opening in 20 seconds after entry. Communication blackout is expected. Elias looked at the timer flashing beside his screen. 20 seconds. That was all the distance between him and the impossible. Behind him, the Alliance fleet was still fighting desperately. Explosions lit the darkness as warships gave everything they had to keep enemy eyes away from one small fighter. Some were falling, some were burning, but all of them were buying him time. Commander Hale's voice came through the static. Quieter than before. "You still with us?" Elias smiled faintly. "Unfortunately, yes," he replied. Hala gave a short laugh, then silence. Then one final sentence. "Don't become a legend out there." Legends usually mean dead people. Elias looked ahead at the narrow opening forming between rotating heat vents. A glowing crack inside the station's armor, unstable and violent, he answered softly. "I'll try to disappoint history." 10 seconds, Ghost 1 accelerated. Every system warning lit up as the ship pushed beyond normal limits. 5 seconds, the thermal gap opened. A tunnel of red light and burning energy deep inside the station. 3, 2, 1. Elias pushed forward. Ghost 1 entered the sunbreaker like a knife through fire. The radio died instantly. No more voices, no more help. Only silence and the scream of the ship around him. Inside the thermal tunnel, heat levels rose violently. The walls glowed like liquid metal, and unstable energy storms moved through the narrow path. Warning alarms exploded across the cockpit. Temperature critical. Shield failure in progress. Structural pressure unstable. The computer voice sounded calm. Almost too calm for the disaster happening around him. Elias ignored it. His eyes stayed locked ahead. Hands moving with pure instinct. This was not flying anymore. This was survival measured in inches. He twisted Ghost 1 between collapsing heat vents. One wrong angle would melt the ship instantly. Sweat rolled down his face, but his hands never shook. A sudden flash lit the tunnel. Defense drones. Small black machines launched from hidden ports in the walls. Fast and armed, the station was protecting its heart. "Of course it is," Elias muttered. The drones opened fire immediately. Blue energy blasts tore through the tunnel behind him. Ghost 1 rolled left, then down, barely escaping the first attack. Another shot struck the side of the ship, shaking the cockpit violently. "Left stabilizer damaged," the computer announced. "Still flying," Elias answered. He fired back. 2 quick plasma shots destroyed the first drone. But 3 more appeared ahead. The tunnel grew tighter. Hotter, more impossible. Every second, the station felt alive. Like it knew he was there, like it wanted him gone. Elias remembered something his father once said during training. "The ship listens to fear. If you panic, it panics with you." So he stayed calm. Even inside hell, he stayed calm. He cut speed suddenly. Let 2 drones pass ahead, then accelerated hard. Ghost 1 shot between them and destroyed both from behind. Only 1 drone remained. It stayed close, locked perfectly on his engine trail. Elias watched the radar carefully, waiting closer, closer. Then he turned sharply into a reactor vent. The heat wave forced the drone too near the wall. And it exploded instantly. Silence returned again. But only for a moment. Ahead, the tunnel opened wider. And there it was, the reactor core, massive, bright, and terrifying. A giant sphere of controlled starfire held inside layers of rotating metal rings. Energy moved around it like a living storm. Elias stared for 1 second. This was it, the center of the sunbreaker. The heart of the enemy empire's greatest weapon. Every ship outside, every soldier fighting. Every person sleeping safely on Earth. All of it had led to this moment. His ship was damaged. His shields were almost gone. Escape was nearly impossible, but none of that mattered now. Because he had reached the place no one believed he could reach. He slowly aimed Ghost 1 toward the glowing center. 1 shot remained, 1 chance. At the center of the station, history was waiting. The reactor core of the Sunbreaker burned in front of Captain Elias Voss like a captured star. Bright, violent, and alive, its energy moved through the giant chamber in endless waves. Metal rings rotated around it like chains trying to hold a sun in place. Every second, the station used that power to prepare its final weapon. One shot from this machine could erase Earth forever. Inside Ghost 1, warning lights covered the cockpit. Shields were nearly gone, the left stabilizer was damaged, and the engine temperature was rising too fast. The ship was dying, but the mission was still alive. Elias kept his hands steady on the controls. He stared at the reactor core and understood the truth. This was the only moment that mattered. No second chance, no second shot, outside the station. The Alliance fleet was still fighting, ships were burning, pilots were falling. And commanders were holding the line with everything they had. They were not fighting to win anymore. They were fighting to give one man enough time to finish. In the silence of the reactor chamber, Elias could almost hear his own heartbeat. He looked at the small silver badge beside the controls. His father's old pilot badge, scratched by war and time. For a moment, memory replaced fear. He remembered being a child, standing beside his father's old fighter ship, asking why pilots always flew toward danger instead of away from it. His father had smiled and said, "Because sometimes the shortest road home goes straight through the fire." Elias looked forward again. Now he understood. This was that fire. The reactor defense system activated suddenly. Red warning symbols appeared across the chamber walls. Hidden defense cannons moved into position, locking onto Ghost 1. "Target detected," the station announced in a cold, mechanical voice. "Of course," Elias whispered. The first cannon fired. A blast of pure energy crossed the chamber, barely missing the ship. Ghost 1 rolled hard to the side, alarms screaming louder. "Structural damage increasing," the computer warned. "I noticed," Elias replied. More cannons opened fire. The reactor room became a storm of light and destruction. Every path looked impossible. Every second looked final. But Elias did not need forever. He only needed one opening. He pushed Ghost 1 between the rotating metal rings. Using them as cover, energy blasts exploded behind him. Shaking the ship violently, one direct hit struck the rear engine. The cockpit trembled, lights flickered, and smoke filled part of the cabin. "Engine failure imminent," the computer announced. Elias coughed once, wiped the smoke from his eyes, and kept flying, closer to the core. The targeting system struggled to lock through the unstable energy field. The reactor itself was too powerful, too chaotic. He had to get closer than anyone should survive. Outside, in Alliance Command, the signal from Ghost 1 had disappeared. No one could hear him now. No one knew if he was alive. Commander Hawley stood silently in front of the screen, watching the battle, waiting for a miracle he could not control. The Admiral asked quietly, "Do you think he made it?" Hawley looked at the burning image of the Sunbreaker and answered, "If Elias is still breathing, he's already trying something stupid." Back inside the reactor chamber, Elias finally reached firing range. The core was enormous now, filling his entire view. It looked less like a machine and more like a star forced into chains. The final weapon was armed. He could see the energy building, faster and faster. Earth did not have much time left. The targeting system locked for one brief second, then lost signal again, unstable. He breathed slowly, forcing calm into chaos. He thought of Earth, of his sister laughing, of Commander Hawley pretending not to care, of ordinary people sleeping under a sky they believed would still be there tomorrow, and of his father, not as a hero, just as a man who once chose duty over fear. Now it was his turn. Elias placed one hand on the control panel beside the old silver badge. "For Earth," he said softly. Then he smiled once, small and real. "And Dad, try not to complain if I park next to you," he fired. A single focused plasma shot left Ghost 1 and flew straight into the heart of the reactor core. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then everything happened. The energy inside the core changed instantly. Stable power turned violent. The giant metal rings shattered as the star inside began to break free. Warning alarms across the entire Sunbreaker exploded at once. Critical reactor collapse detected, the station announced. The chamber shook like the station itself was screaming. Elias pulled hard on the controls, turning Ghost 1 toward the escape path. Behind him, the reactor was collapsing into chaos. Fire, light, and destruction spreading faster than thought. The impossible mission had been completed. But survival was still one final battle away, and history had just begun to change. The Sunbreaker did not explode like a normal weapon. It collapsed like a dying star losing control of its own heart, inside the massive station. The reactor core that once held impossible energy was now breaking apart. Metal rings cracked, energy fields tore open, and violent light spilled through every corridor. What had once been the most powerful weapon in the galaxy was now becoming its own destruction. Captain Elias Voss turned Ghost 1 away from the core at full speed. The cockpit shook violently as shockwaves moved through the station. Alarms screamed nonstop. The ship was barely holding together. Structural integrity critical, the computer warned. Multiple system failures detected. Elias ignored it. His eyes stayed forward, locked on the narrow path he had entered through. Behind him, the Sunbreaker was collapsing. Defense systems failed one by one, drones shut down mid-air, and entire sections of the station began to tear apart. The weapon that was meant to destroy Earth was now destroying itself. But Elias was still inside it. A massive explosion wave moved through the corridor. Ghost 1 was thrown sideways, crashing against the tunnel wall. Warning lights flashed red across the cockpit. Smoke filled the cabin, and for a moment, everything went dark. Engine power at 18%, the computer said. Elias coughed, gripping the controls tightly. Good enough, he replied quietly. He forced the damaged ship forward again. There was no time to think about damage, only survival, behind him. The Sunbreaker's internal structure began to collapse completely. Energy vents burst open, releasing uncontrolled bursts of heat and light. The station started breaking apart from the inside. Like a giant structure losing its memory, falling into chaos, outside, in space. The Alliance fleet watched the impossible happen. From a distance, they saw the Sunbreaker change color. Its core light flickered, then turned unstable. What's happening inside it? One commander asked. No one had an answer. Then suddenly, a massive energy pulse erupted from the station. A shockwave spread across space, shaking nearby ships. Reactor collapse confirmed, a voice reported through comms. Silence followed. In the Alliance command center, everyone froze. The hologram of the Sunbreaker began to break apart on the screen. Commander Hawley stepped forward slowly. Eyes fixed on the display. Did he do it? Someone asked quietly. Hawley did not answer immediately. He just stared at the collapsing structure, back inside the chaos. Elias pushed Ghost 1 through burning corridors. The thermal gap he had entered through was now unstable and closing. Every path looked the same: fire, destruction, collapsing metal, and fading light. Navigation offline, the computer said. Of course it is, Elias muttered. He relied only on memory now. On instinct, on training, on survival. A sudden explosion hit the tunnel ahead. Blocking part of the exit, the path was closing. Not now, Elias said through clenched teeth. He pushed the ship into a tight roll, squeezing through a narrow opening between collapsing walls. Metal scraped the hull. Sparks flew inside the cockpit. One mistake now would mean being trapped forever inside a dying station. But Elias did not stop. He saw a small opening ahead. The exit tunnel, faint but still open. Come on, he whispered, behind him. The Sunbreaker's final structural core failed. A massive chain reaction began. Entire sections of the station broke apart and disappeared into space, like pieces of a broken world falling into darkness. Ghost 1 shot through the final corridor. The exit tunnel opened like a crack in reality. Elias pushed the engines one last time. The ship burst out of the collapsing station. For 1 second, everything went silent. Then space returned, cold, endless, and real, behind him. The Sunbreaker finally collapsed completely. A massive explosion of energy and light spread through the void. But it was no longer a weapon. It was just debris. The greatest threat in the galaxy had ended. Inside Ghost 1, systems shut down one by one. The ship drifted slowly, damaged but still intact. Elias leaned back in his seat, breathing heavily. For a moment, he did not move. The mission was over. On the Alliance command channel, static slowly cleared. A weak signal appeared. Ghost 1. This is command. Respond. Silence. Then a faint voice came through. Still alive, Elias said quietly. The command center erupted instantly. Relief, shock, disbelief. Commander Hale closed his eyes for a moment. Then exhaled slowly. He did it, he said outside. The battlefield had changed completely. The Varkan fleet, now without their main weapon, began to retreat in confusion for the first time. They were no longer unstoppable. They were afraid. Far away from the battlefield, Earth still turned quietly in space, unaware that death had come close and been stopped by one ship in the broken silence of space. Elias's damaged fighter drifted like a small light among ruins. Not a legend yet, not a hero yet, just a survivor. But somewhere in that moment, history had already changed forever. Because one human pilot had flown into the impossible, and the impossible had fallen.